Welcome to another edition of Teach the Geek interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I am the founder of Teach the Geek. I work with technical professionals so they can present more effectively, especially in front of non-technical audiences. And you can learn more about that at teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Today, my guest is Ash Hynie. She's the founder of CountrPT. Be building a product that will help employees document their achievements. So I'm really interested to learn about her path into tech and also the reasons for the genesis of Counter PT. And as you all know, if you don't know, you will know by now. But we'll also talk about public speaking, so we'll talk about that too. So welcome to Teach the Geek interviews, Ash.
Thank you so much. I appreciate being on the show.
Great. So I'm really curious, what type of work did you do before you got into the tech field?
Um, I was a chef for 16 years before I got into engineering. And so I'm a formally trained chef, went to culinary school, specialized in Asian and Indian cuisine. And yeah, I was making food in the kitchen.
Wow, I just find that so fascinating. Maybe mainly because I like to eat. So that's possibly it. And I'm always curious about people like you who become chefs. Are you kind of snobby when it comes to eating other people's food?
I wouldn't say that I'm snobby. I love the art of food in general. So if you were to make me a meal, Neil, I would go to your house. I would be so thankful. I would love every morsel of what you made me, and that would be that. However, if I'm going to a restaurant, I'm probably going to be the chattiest one at the table.
Yeah, I watch a lot of food types of shows on YouTube. I'm always
Uh-huh.
curious about the plating because it seems like people put a lot of effort into the way you put the sauce because you can't just put the sauce. You got to put it like in a swirl or something like that.
Absolutely. I mean, so plating, let me take it back a little bit from the question you just asked. I love good food in general, and you can get that anywhere from Mama's Kitchen all the way to a five-star Michelin restaurant. And the reality is like however you plate it is all about the art. So when I'm at my mom's house, for example, she will always have the biggest pile of greens on a plate, and then there will be like fried chicken, and there will be mac and cheese. And it's very well presented. But yeah, you're right. When you go into a restaurant, one of the things that they do teach you in culinary school is like this item of plating, which is the art or the craft of getting the food on the plate to look presentable, for a number of different presentations. The sauce is its own specialty in school. Also, I don't think a lot of people know that you can take an entire course on sauce. And then how you get that sauce onto the plate is such an art form. So whether you're splattering it on there with a spoon, or some people I've seen throw pieces of food onto sauce to make it splatter. But anyways, yeah, the plating is a huge deal, and was one of my favorite parts because the creativity around getting the food on the plate to present as well as it tastes is just a whole art in itself.
So what prompted you to make that switch from the kitchen to the tech field?
Oh, heavens. The schedule, honestly. I'm going to be honest. When I moved to New York City, my intentions were to continue on with my chef career. And then I realized I wasn't meeting new people in the city. I was overwhelmed at the schedule being so drastically different than the type of schedule that you would want and need to associate with friends because you're working all night. You work until 4 in the morning. You get into the kitchen at 5 p.m., sometimes 3, depending on your preparation, and then you're there until 4 or 5 in the morning. And so it's a long day, it's a lot of work. And I was new to a city and I wanted to get to know folks. So the schedule didn't really allow me to live the life in New York that I wanted. And so I started looking after other opportunities.
Wow, that's interesting. So I'm also curious to even how you would make that kind of jump. I don't really hear a whole lot of people that were chefs and then they start working in the tech field. So how did you make that, how did you make that switch?
When I was a kid, my brother and I, we used to go to Goodwill and buy computer parts and video games and things that were just completely worn down. Basically what we could afford because we didn't have much money when I was a kid. And so we'd go home and we'd program our own games on computers. We'd build our own computer consoles, gaming consoles. And that was my first exposure to programming. And I didn't really know it was a it was an actual job, like that people got paid to do it. I thought it was more just fun spending time with my brother. He's about 8 years older than me, so he was my guiding light. And so when I moved to New York, and I was chefing and doing a couple of other odd jobs. A friend of mine had asked if I wanted to do some hours at his company as a contractor because I would always fix his computer. And so he knew I was the computer geek of the friend group. And I said, yeah, I definitely want to get some money. So I went and I started working at his company. Little did I know the CTO was watching the work that I was doing. And so he came to my desk one day and said, hey, listen, you've been asking really great questions. Your work is phenomenal. Had you ever considered doing this full time as a career? And I looked and I was like, I didn't even know. So it was happenstance. It was just, me playing around, being resourceful with my skills, trying to earn money in a really expensive city. And then I found my way into engineering and then the rest is history.
Wow. So, as someone who has, I guess, I suppose, a more, what one would call a non-traditional background, what were I guess, the hurdles that someone like you would have to overcome to make it in tech?
Yeah. There, that's a really great question. The biggest one that I would say is learning where and when and how to ask the questions. Um, my curiosity from food, language, all the way to engineering has always been high. And I realized very quickly that there are some people you can ask a million questions to, and there are others that just don't, they're not having it. So it was not being discouraged when I got the no's, continuing to be curious, continuing to drive after getting the answers. And I think that that's kind of the nature of engineering, right? Is like you have questions, you need answers. And for me, because I had worked in the kitchen and had done some other stuff, it was really about getting that interpersonal relationship built with engineers at the company that I worked at, as well as building communities that had other engineers and programmers in it, asking all the questions, researching all the things. Don't be fooled by this baby face. The internet was not this resource that it is today. And so a simple Google search would lead you to a number of different possibilities, not all correct. And so testing that out. And yeah, again, just asking the questions.
I'm really so I had a guest pretty early on when I started this podcast, and she started a business called Compassionate Coding. She worked as a software engineer for a number of years, and she knows that in the tech fields, especially the more technical people, the software developers, the engineers, they didn't have they weren't the most emotionally intelligent people. And so she started this business to really help these technical people basically learn how to talk to others in a
Mhm.
way that was more, I don't know, charitable, perhaps. You ever heard of the term RTFM?
No.
So she was telling me about this term that they would use amongst each other, and also to perhaps other people within the company who weren't technical. RTFM stands for read the effing manual.
Yeah.
So this lack of emotional intelligence, is that something that you experienced working in the tech field? And if so, how did you deal with it?
Yeah, that was the interesting part about tech for me is because I had this large curiosity around engineering and computers, and I recognize I don't always fit the stereotype for a number of reasons. But one of them was because I'm more chatty. I like to be having conversations with people and working through problems verbally rather than just sitting in front of a computer and hamming them out on my own. And so I did recognize very early that there were a lot of introverts. I'm an introvert myself, but I'm a social introvert, so I can do both. Which worked in my favor because I can sit down at a computer and work for hours without being interrupted and get a lot of stuff done. But a lot of the folks that I was working with in the beginning and throughout my career, they're not very socially excitable when it comes to having conversations with other folks. And that's fine. So I developed this process really early where I would ask people when I first met them, especially in a working situation, how they like to be interrupted. And knowing myself, asking all the questions, it was really important for me to establish from the beginning, how do you like to talk to me, if at all? And some folks are like, I don't like to be interrupted. You can Slack me or you can email me. Other folks said, yeah, we had a cube system where they would turn the cube on green if they were available for you to come to their desk and ask questions, and then they turn it on red if they didn't want to be interrupted. So there was a number of ways that we would find, or that I would find, communicating with my Eng teams. Came to life. So each person had their own preference. I respected that. I didn't ask questions as to why they didn't want to be interrupted or whatnot. It was just about recognizing everyone's different. I knew my tendency to be chatty. So I wanted to make sure that if we're collaborating together, we're always on the same page from a communication perspective.
Man, you tech people are such weirdos.
It's true.
I
It
worked
is true.
I worked in medical devices for a number of years as a product development engineer. It never would have even occurred to me to look for somebody's cube to see if it's green or red, to see if I can I talk to you now? It's like, look, I got a question. If I got a question, I got a question. I'm gonna ask you the question when I feel like asking you the question. I'm not even it never even occurred to me that this is not the time to ask me a question because I got the cube on red.
But
Like,
have you
to
ever
hell with your
interrupted
crew, man.
a meeting? Right. That came from a lot of trial and error. It came from interrupting people when they were in their flow and then getting the backlash of that. So I think it was because I had gotten burned so many times. I was a little more hesitant to just walk up and ask the question. And again, that's just me. Some people don't care and they'll just ask the question anyways. But I was always the you get more bees with honey type person. So let me kind of, smooth
Wow.
them up as much as I can.
You know what? You're better than me, Ash. So kudos to you for looking out for the cube and like, oh, you can Slack me. It's like, oh, the hell with the damn Slack. I don't even remember my password. Look, I'm here. You're here. I'm looking at your cube. I can see your cube from where I'm sitting.
Mhm.
I'm going to go over and ask you my question, and I'm going to go back to do what I was doing. That's what
I
I'm
love
gonna do
it.
because that's efficient. No. I gotta get on the Slack. I gotta type the damn thing. I gotta look to see if there's typos, and then I gotta press press send, and I gotta wait. And I'm looking at you. I'm looking right at you, and I'm typing. I'm supposed to talk to you.
That's so silly. That is so silly. You're right. You're right.
Wow, that's hilarious. That's wow. Oh man, these tech people. What's their problem? And now so many of them, and at least fairly recently, so many of them got laid off from these big tech companies, and now they got to find companies. You better hope that the people you want to reach out to, you don't have to look at their cube. See if it's
Listen,
red.
but that's the season we're in, right? So the pendulum has swung the other way. And in a world where engineers kind of ruled the communication spectrum or how work was getting done, now they're you kind of got to be collaborative. You got to be sociable. You have to be likable in a lot of ways, which there are some old engineers that I would work with, not old in age, but when I was back in my early days, that probably would have a hard time finding employment today because they had a nasty attitude or they weren't very social. The face of engineering has changed in that interpersonal relationship is a lot more valuable because you have to be liked to do the job in a lot of these companies now.
That's so interesting because as I mentioned, I worked in medical devices, which seems to be so different than working at a tech company because a lot of the work we did was in teams. So it wasn't just me just working on my own. I had to report and have meetings with the marketing person, with the quality person, with the regulatory affairs person. You had to speak to these other people, and I highly doubt that I could tell all of them just look at my cube. I just don't think I don't think it would go over well. I think someone would tell me to go to HR. I don't think it just based on the work that we did that was so group based. It was necessary for us to learn how to speak to other people, and that's just the way it was. And the fact that so many of the people that worked in tech could get away with having to look at cubes for all this time. Wow, that's I don't even know what to say. Crazy.
Times have changed.
Yeah,
Times have
yeah, for sure. You can't rely on that Slack channel now, buddy. Okay, so I'm curious for the people like that are like you that have this non-traditional background and they're thinking, maybe I want to move into the tech field. What advice would you give them to make that transition?
Oh, heavens. I think you nailed it in the beginning. Just be prepared to work and interact in ways that you have not before. right? That transition for me going from the kitchen to the computer was a really fascinating one. And like I mentioned, I got burned a lot in the beginning, mostly because my expectations were so narrow. And that's where I would say, have the open mind, but also kind of get in there. Today is such a different world in tech than it was before. If you want to transition from, whatever field you're in, if you are a chef, if you are, doing PM work, if you're doing, I mean, wherever you're coming from, the transferable skills one are going to be the thing that kind of lead you. And so do leverage the things you know and the skills you have, but also be open to learning new things about how people work and how this new system of working will change the way you value yourself as well as the output that you put out in the world. Um, there was, I think we get too caught up sometimes in our work to say, I did this thing and here's the immediate result of that. Be open to what that communicates to when you get into this field. Because you can be working on a project that doesn't see the light of day ever, depending on what company you work at, or, takes a little bit of time to get out into the world, which can be difficult if you are a chef and you put food on the table immediately for people to eat and you get those smiles and those laughs and giggles when they eat something delicious. So that instantaneous gratification, you might have to wait a little bit longer when you get into tech to get that same feeling of accomplishment.
Got it. I mean, I mentioned in the intro that you founded a company, CountrPT. So what is CountrPT and what was your motivation to start it?
Yeah. Um, so lovingly named Counter PT or Counterpoint. I will call it Counterpoint. Um, what motivated it was the name. So the name is exactly where the motivation came from, which is when you are that individual and you are wanting to bring value into the world and the folks around you are not seeing it, how do you communicate that? And it's that little pushback that you give people to remind them, like, here's what I've worked on, here's what I've done, here's how I'm showing up in the world to affect the bottom line of the business, the bottom line of the project, the bottom line of my career. And so the name Counterpoint came from the idea that sometimes we have to add a little bit more context to the conversation so that folks can start to see the value.
Interesting. So when someone is interacting with counterpoint, I suspect it's in the context of a boss and a subordinate. So the subordinate is keeping track of all the things that they've accomplished in their role. And what does the boss get? Is it just a readout of some kind? Is it an app that they have to access? What exactly does it look like?
Yeah, let me tell you. So, it's more about the subordinate, or I'm just gonna call the employee. And employees can be leaders, they can be managers, they can be executives. But the reality that I found when I'm sorry about that. The reality that I found when I got into tech was that I was valued off of my documentation. So, regardless of what I was working on, some people could see it, some people couldn't. But engineering is a rather mysterious um, craft within all of tech. And for those who know, they know, and they know how to weigh the value and they know what it looks like. But when you start getting into the conversation about performance reviews and impact to the business and affecting the bottom line, there's dissonance there. And so, as an employee, the better you learn how to document and communicate your value, the better time you have in creating the career that you would find valuable. And again, I learned this through trial by fire. I learned it through talking a lot about the things I was doing instead of documenting them. We can talk for a long time about ourselves, and yet that doesn't really go anywhere. It'll go in one ear and then out the other for the people that we're speaking to. However, what I did recognize is documentation is king. And so Counterpoint is an app that you get on and it uses your powerful voice. So it's a conversational AI with an agentic people manager to talk through your success. And it's the same way you would have a one-on-one with a manager or a leader while you're talking about your current accomplishments or the hardships you're having. And then what it does is it uses that to create a small language model for you. And with that small language model, it can coach you and mentor you and manage you through your career by providing insights on Here's something you should check in with your manager on. Here are your high impact points. This is what you should include in your performance review. Here is the feedback you have for your team, etc. So it provides very specific insights that assist you in being the best that you can be without always having that touch point with your leadership. So what your leaders get is a very effective person who knows how to manage up. And that's really what the best managers depend on is their folks to be very communicative about their impact so that they can speak more eloquently about how they're affecting the bottom line for their company.
Yes, that's so interesting. And so you mentioned that it's you speaking to the app, and then the app it then can communicate back to you, things that you can do to impact your career in a positive way, and then you can pass that on to your superior to show them, in black and white, or just why you are a benefit to the company and why you should get that pay raise
Yeah.
and promotion. But I really like the part that of you speaking, because a lot of times if you have to actually document it by typing, that might be an annoyance. Just like it would have been an annoyance to have to communicate with that guy that you're looking right at with back channel.
Exactly.
The damn like,
Exactly.
looking right at you, bro. Like, what are we doing?
I mean, and I love what you're bringing to your audience as well. Our voice is so powerful, and when you talk about like public speaking or speaking in general, my favorite thing about being a public speaker is again, just like with chefing, and you put the plate down and they taste the food, and there's that immediate response that you get the feedback from folks. When you're speaking to them on a stage, you can see people's reactions and responses as you're talking to them. And you know how powerful your words are by those responses. However, what you also recognize is those folks are likely documenting pieces of your talk or they're notating the impressions that they have. So it once again goes from voice to paper. Like the documentation is going to be the thing that carries the message. It will always be the thing that carries the message and the impact. And so that's exactly what went into Counterpoint was as I'm speaking, I know that it's only momentary until it becomes forever when I document that. And too often we leave our legacy to someone else just by speaking it. Sometimes we have the joy of having our legacy, brought from person to person through the art of storytelling. But as we know at the game of telephone, that gets lost in translation sometimes. So, anyways, I can go on with this metaphor for years if you let me. But there's so much power in our voice. Counterpoint is to capture those really important moments and bring them to the present so that you can be better calibrated for your work.
When it comes to speaking in front of others, Ash, is that something you've always been good at? And if not, what did you do to get better at it?
No, well, I started speaking publicly at such a young age. I don't know how to answer that question well. And I don't mean, I'm a motivational speaker at the age of 12. No, but I remember being in church when I was a kid and having to talk about object lessons over the pulpit or reading scripture over the pulpit, and not to get too religious with folks because, not important for the longevity of the story, but that's where the beginnings of my public speaking started. And I didn't really realize how big of an impact that had on me until I got older and felt comfortable in front of others, and speaking and bringing object lessons to light and nailing down points for folks. But I will say that over time, it took work to hone the skill and to assist with how do I get this point to the audience that I'm in front of?
Yeah. I had to speak in front of the church at church as well when I was a kid, not because I chose to.
No, it was never right. But hey, sing that song or do that thing and show the folks you can do it.
You know what's so crazy about it, Ash? Is I wasn't even an only child. I have two siblings, but I'm the one that had to do it. I'm looking at these other two as like, I'm not only child here. Why am I up here by myself? You ain't forcing them to do nothing. It's like, oh man, did my mother hate me?
Because if your mother hated you, then my mother hated me because it was the same situation. I have two other siblings, and I was always the one.
Oh, yeah, what's the problem?
But also, look at us. You run a podcast, and I speak publicly, so maybe they saw something. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. You know what? That's the story we're gonna go with because yeah,
Let's go
if
with
not,
it.
then I'm gonna pull my hair out and I have a little bit of hair. I'm trying to keep
I was like, that's a hard job,
it.
get in there. I love it.
When it comes to the speaking that you do, Ash, do you ever get nervous before a presentation? And if so, how do you deal with your nerves?
Every time. Every time. And this is something that you find when you get to those speakers dinners and those speaker events, or you're behind stage and there's all the speakers that are there with you, is every one of them are rehearsing, or they're getting in their zone and they're doing their thing to kind of focus in on the next task at hand. I get nervous every time, but I get nervous mostly because I want to do a good job. I want to make sure that the message gets heard and the people that need to feel seen in that conversation get seen. And so, ways that I've worked through that are, I like to make light in the beginning of the conversation, make a few jokes. If I've had conversations with folks at the conference beforehand or at the company beforehand, bring those up. Um, I love to tie in other talks. So if I was able to attend other talks at the conference, I'll go, I'll take notes. I will thread them into my talk so that folks know like we're locked in, we're all tapped in. But then also just to show respect to the fact that as speakers, we're all trying really hard to bring our expertise into the room in a consumable way. And so it's done with respect. I take the nervousness seriously because it reminds me that we were all new at one point and we're all trying to do a good job. And so to have that level of empathy and grace for myself, but then also for others who are speaking, as well as for audience members who are there to get something.
Yeah, I agree with you, Ash. I truly believe that if you're not nervous before a presentation, it's probably a sign that you don't care about
Yeah.
the outcome. You don't care if you do a good job or not. If people actually get what you're trying to say, it's just you're just going through the motions, reading slides, and trying to get out of there as quickly as possible, which is what I used to do back when I had to give presentations.
You
But
have to start somewhere.
hey, I got better at it over time. My project got canceled. I thought, well, you know what? This whole presenting in front of people thing, maybe this is something I need to get better at. So that was basically the start of my journey in getting better at presenting in front of others. So when it comes also to the people who are watching or listening to our conversation, Ash, and they're thinking, this whole speaking in front of others, public speaking thing, this is definitely something I want to get better at. If you were to offer them a reason as to why they wanted to improve at it, what would it be?
Oh, heavens. So I'm a founder now, which I think it's very fascinating going from engineering to founder, and you have all these different responsibilities as a founder. When I think about the skills that I use today as a founder, one of the biggest ones that you'll use time and time again is how to get your point across from the problem you're solving to the solution that you have. So, talking about counterpoint and then the problem that we're solving. And being able to refine that and simplify that and to alter it and to move it depending on the audience that I'm speaking to has been probably the biggest skill from public speaking that I have. And so, for the folks out there who are thinking about their speaking career, whether it's just simply presentations at your job, all the way to main stages as keynote speakers, or even if you at one point in time create your own product and you're pitching it to investors or to potential clients, every single one of those is an example of public speaking. Every single one of those, you're going to pull from those skills and you're going to refine being able to take big concepts and make it very simple so that anybody can digest it. That's the craft. And if you can think about it that way, of every time we're brilliant out there. So when you talk about the brains of those who are engineers, we're brilliant people in our own craft. There's brilliance in all crafts. um, how do you bring that brilliance to a place where people can say, I understand what you're saying simply? And I relate to that. And I love that idea. And um, I'm going to take that idea and it's going to resonate, or I'm going to use it.
Excellent. This has been a great conversation, Ash. Thank you so much for being a guest. How can people get in touch with you?
Oh, heavens. LinkedIn is a great place. I'm on LinkedIn, ash.hynie, Hynie, or Heine. Just don't call me late to dinner. Um, or you can hit me up on TikTok. I'm there often. And that's probably where you'll get the spicy Ash. It's Ash to your tech bestie, Ash Tech Bestie on TikTok. So happy to join you there. Follow, like our LinkedIn page for Counterpoint, subscribe to our newsletter. I'm around. We have a Discord if you want to get a hold of us real quick with some feedback. We're here for you.
Wonderful. Well, everyone, that marks the end of another edition of Teach the Geek interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I am the founder of Teach the Geek. I work with technical professionals so they can present more effectively, especially in front of non-technical audiences. And you can learn more about that at teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Until next time, take care and stay safe. Thanks, Ash.
Thank you.